Hello. Hiya, Harry. Welcome to the Pun Show. So, we're going to talk about a few things today. The big things I want to talk about are the SAVE Act. If you haven't read it, you might be more surprised about what's not in it than is in it. And so we'll get to you on that in a minute. I think it's actually the most shocking revelation I have had regarding the SAVE Act. And I'll get to that in a bit. But the first thing I want to talk about is something Harry, I am certain, will have an opinion on. And that is the guy that we got suspended. I can't think of his name. And I probably can't pronounce it either. Valerian Bologan. I'm got a friend from Africa that told me everybody's butchering his name, and so I'm sorry if I butchered that. But he got issued this red card in the last match, and a red card is normally supposed to mean you get suspended in the next match, which tonight is the next match. It's only been repealed one time before in the history of the World Cup, and that was like back in 1960 or 62 or something like that. Like Kennedy was president. So give you an idea how long ago that was. All right, so Donald Trump got on the horn, spoke to the FIFA dude, and an hour later, the suspension was suspended, which was a little confusing when I was reading it. And I'm like, wait, they suspended the suspension? So he won't get suspended if he doesn't do anything naughty for a year. He won't get, so he's like on delayed. He's on, what do they call it? Conditional probation or whatever. Anyway, there is two things at play here. Well, three things at play. One, I don't think he deserved the red card in the first place, right? Like, I don't think that there was enough there to warrant a red card. That said, the red card had been issued. And so having somebody else come in and decide to repeal it, that's not a good thing either. Like, I don't think the fact that a bad call was made means that somebody that's not even involved with soccer gets to change that bad call. That's not a trend I want to set either. What happens next? There's a controversial call in the Super Bowl, so we changed the winner. Like, it's a bad red card. That doesn't mean that Donald Trump calling FIFA and saying change it means it should be changed. So that's the second thing. The third thing is the USA is still playing tonight. And they're still an exciting team. They're still possibly the best team the USA has ever put on a field. And there was a lot of good feeling and enthusiasm put on. Or, America was feeling actual pride over their soccer team, which is never a thing I thought I would say. It's got the same kind of energy as the Dream Team did back in 1992. And don't let Donald Trump ruin that for you. It's not Team USA's fault that he did that. And it's not Balogun's fault. It's not his fault. So don't let this ruin your joy. Just Donald Trump has to make everything about Donald Trump. My view is don't let him make this about Donald Trump. Let's make this about the soccer team. Let's not let him steal this from us. So that's my view on that. Harry says, "Have you seen what is going on with Bosnia?" I have not. The Is this political or soccer oriented? Um, but anyway, that's my thoughts on this whole World Cup thing. The next thing I want to talk about is the SAVE Act, and I'm sure people will have something to chime in. And here's the thing: I keep hearing about the SAVE Act over and over again, whether it's Mike Johnson or some troll on Twitter or whoever is like, "What's wrong with showing your ID when you vote?" And for most people, there's nothing wrong with that. The thing is, and I like, my impression was that that was only a small percentage of what is in the bill. That the bill is actually has a lot of other stuff in it, and it's the other stuff that I found problematic. But I went in today. I wanted to see just how little it had to say about actually showing your ID when you voted. And you know what it says about presenting your ID when you vote? Absolutely nothing. Like, I went and I looked at the bill and I looked for something. I thought, I've got to be missing something here. So I went and I asked ChatGPT. I'm like, am I missing something here? And Chat's like, nope, it doesn't say anything at all. It doesn't address it presenting ID when you vote. So I'm like, okay, what about the Gemini? So I went to Google and asked Gemini the same question. Gemini's like, nope. So I went and I said, okay, what about Claude? I asked Claude. Claude's like, nope. And then I went and I asked Grok, and Grok's like, nope. So I asked 4 different AIs and actually looked at the bill. So I'm not just saying this off the cuff, and it's not like I didn't try to find what it says about voter ID. It says nothing at all about voter ID. It has zero to do with presenting voter ID when you vote. So when people make these arguments about, well, polling like 70% or 80% of people, even the majority of Democrats, think that you should have to show your ID when you vote. And that's not in the bill. If that is so important to you, that there should be a national law that you have to present your ID to the people when you vote, then you should be against the bill. You should be against the SAVE Act because it's not in there. Did you know that? Am I the only one that knows this? Why do we call it a voter ID bill when it has nothing at all to do with voter IDs? We should call it a birth certificate bill. Here's the other part. There are a number of IDs that they present that are qualified as things that you can present when you go to register to vote. There are a number of documents. It's about like 5 or 6. And we'll take one group of people because it's not really an issue with them, and that's, people that immigrated over here and naturalized citizens, and so they have to show their certificate of naturalization. I have no problem with that. The other people have to show, they can show like their passport, they can show their birth certificate, they can show different forms of ID, like a military ID that says you're a citizen. There are some real IDs that specify you're a citizen, but those are very rare. They're only available in a handful of states. And you have to get a birth certificate to get one. You have to have a birth certificate to get one. All the documents that you can show require a birth certificate. So basically, you have to have a birth certificate to vote. Everything else is just begging the question. So the issue there is not everybody has one. And I don't mean there's, some reporting out there about people that don't have, immediate access to a birth certificate. And that can be problematic too, but not as problematic. Like, let's say you're a college kid that goes to school in Dallas and your parents live in Waco, right? And so your birth certificate is with your parents in like some kind of fireproof box, and you have to like drive all the way to Dallas to get it. That's a a bit inconvenient, but it's possible. And what isn't possible is getting one if it was never issued, or getting one if it like the hospital burned down in a fire or was destroyed by a tornado or washed away in a flood. There are people who simply through no fault of their own, they don't just not have easy access to a birth certificate. They don't have a birth certificate to access at all. And those people have no means of proving their citizenship. So this bill, it does say that states can determine how these other people can prove their citizenship. But the other states already have that. They already have means for if you don't have a birth certificate. And a lot of them, it's just as simple as checking a box that says, I swear under penalty of perjury that I'm a citizen. And there are a handful of people over the years who have violated that law and have been convicted of checking that box illegally. But it's a very tiny number of people. It's infinitesimal when it's compared to the people that just don't have birth certificates at all. So that's one of my major issues with it, is it's not you have to have a citizen to vote, be a citizen to vote. It's you have to be a citizen with a birth certificate to vote. The second thing that I find problematic is you have to register in person to vote by mail. Now, many people that vote by mail in some states, especially like in Texas, most of the people, almost everyone that votes by mail because there is a major hindrance to voting in person. Like in Texas has tried to make it like, if you can vote in person, you have to vote in person. Even during COVID, they didn't waive any restrictions or anything. Like you had to vote in person in Texas. A lot of people were mad about it. But now you have to register to vote in person. And so the same encumbrances for people that can't vote in person. If you're an invalid, it's a lot harder to get to vote, or not an invalid, but like a quadriplegic or something. It's not that easy to just dash down and wait in line and vote. All right. Now those same encumbrances apply to register to vote. Right? If you're going to have a hard time going to vote in person, you're going to have a hard time going to register to vote in person. And the same thing goes, like, if you're out of state, and this isn't just affecting Democrats and liberals, it affects people in the military. When I was in the Air Force, I was actually a resident of Virginia, but I voted in Texas. So I voted by mail. I filled out a mail-in ballot and I mailed it in. And if I actually turned 18 while I was in the military. I joined when I was 17. My 18th birthday came while I was in the military. So I couldn't register to vote. So I registered by mail. I would have had to take leave, fly to Virginia, register to vote, and then come back in order to vote. And if I had been married, my spouse would have had to go with me. You're making this extremely obnoxious hurdle for people in the military just to register to vote. And it's not just people in the military. You've got people that live overseas. You've got their spouses. You've got, people that live and work in embassies, even work for the government. And there's no reason that this needs to be a thing. There's no proven issue with people illegally registering to vote by mail. So, those are my issues with the SAVE Act. But again, the one issue I don't have with it is it saying that you have to show your ID when you vote, because it doesn't say you have to show your ID when you vote. So the next time somebody tells you about that and what's your problem with it, just ask them why they support it if they think you should have to show your ID when you vote. Sorry, Harry, I'll look at that Bosnia thing later, but right now it's going to derail my train of thought. They are just trying to mislead the constituents who they know won't actually read it in order to gain support. And this is thank you, Revival. I think this is a really important point. If they are trying to tell you that the voter ID is just about this thing that it doesn't contain, why are they doing that? Why don't they go out and try to sell you on what is actually in the bill? Because they know that if you know that bill makes it harder for members of the U.S. military and their spouses to vote. You register when you get your ID. Some people do. That's totally irrelevant. Everyone remember too, everyone has an ID can vote. No, that's not true. No, Brandon, varies state to state. Your driver's license is not sufficient. Your real ID is not sufficient to register to vote or to vote. This is just wrong, Brandon. I'm not going to spend a bunch of time on my show engaging with somebody who is correcting me with wrong information. You are wrong, Brandon. You can go look it up. Just go to your favorite AI or just Google it or use your favorite search engine and ask the question, is your driver's license enough to let you vote? Yes, you can register to vote when you get a renew ID that's irrelevant. You can't register to vote. First of all, I didn't have to go to DMV to renew my driver's license. I live in Texas. And this is not about, whether or not you can register when you go to DMV to get your license. It's whether or not you have to go to DMV at all to register. No, Brandon, this entire rant is apparently way over your head. It is not nonsense, Brandon. Did you miss the beginning, Brandon? Right. There are people illegally voting. There are which one is it? I think it's the Federalist Society or the Heritage Foundation, one of the two. A Republican think tank has put together a list of every single case they can find of voter fraud of any sort in any election, whether it be a local election or a primary election or a school board election or a presidential election or an off-year election or whatever. About 4 billion votes in all. And they found about 1,400 cases of voter fraud. So I am not saying that voter fraud doesn't happen. I am saying that voter fraud does not happen with enough frequency to disenfranchise millions of voters. It can be done with electoral roll. You'd want ID to register on the roll, though. I don't even know what you mean by an electoral roll. I don't even, that's not a word I've ever heard before. No, you have to register when you get your ID. Okay. You apparently don't understand what is going on, Brandon. Read the bill. It is not. Okay, let's say, let me put it this way, Brandon. Let's say you have a driver's license and you registered to vote when you got your driver's license, but then you rent a house. And so you moved because the owner of the house wanted to sell it. And so you had to move. When you moved, you changed your address. When you changed your address, you have to go to DMV and register it in person now. You have to change your registration in person. You can't do it online. You have to do it in person. Otherwise, your registration is no longer valid. So yes, you can register when you go get your driver's license. The question, Brandon, is what happens if people otherwise wouldn't need to go change their driver's license? You're putting a hurdle in place. You're putting an extra step in place that is unnecessary. It's a joke in what Trump wants to cheat. The thing is, and I've looked at this, I've thought about it. And I think that Trump is trying to cheat, but I don't think that this just affects Democrats. A lot of Republicans are affected too. This have to register in person thing. And if you're already registered to vote, you have to register to vote by mail in person. So it's like a separate requirement, like having already been registered to get an absentee ballot, you actually have to go and register to vote by mail in person. So let's say, Brandon, that you have Bob is in the military and he gets sent to a different state. And he still wants to vote in Texas because he's a proud Texan, so he wants to vote by mail. He's stationed at Grand Forks Air Force Base in North Dakota. So to get on a plane, he'd have to fly to Minnesota, fly to the Twin Cities, and then fly somewhere else, and then fly to Texas. Like fly to Atlanta and then fly to Texas or something. It's got to take this big, long, circuitous flight just to get here. And why? Just to register by mail, even though he's already a registered voter in Texas. He has to change his registration to vote by mail. Why should he have to do all that? Give me a reason that should be a requirement. So when none of you are saying happens, you're able to use our driver's license. Scuzzy, when it does happen, what are you going to say? How will you react? This is what the law says. I am just reading what the law says. All right. Now, I don't know what you mean and when you say when none of this happens, because when you're able to use our driver's license to vote in the next election. This bill, Scuzz, says absolutely nothing about what ID you present when you go to vote. And the whole thing about they've done study after study of voter ID laws. And for the most part, no voter IDs laws have ever impacted elections one way or another. They haven't caught more fraud. They haven't prevented people from voting. They've done nothing. They're just an extraneous requirement. Because most people already have it. It hasn't, but the SAVE Act itself says nothing whatsoever about presenting IDs when you vote or what counts as IDs when you vote. But it does say you need certain IDs and only certain IDs when you register to vote. And all of those IDs are either a birth certificate or require a birth certificate. And there are round about 1 million Americans that were born in America. They are actual American citizens who, through no fault to their own, simply do not have a birth certificate. I am not talking about it would be hard to get one. And I'm not saying black people are too stupid to get one, like the way that the conservatives always want to try and morph that argument into. They don't have them. Some people were never issued one, especially some elderly people born in the rural South, you know, that are 70 plus. There are also other people who the hospital they were born in, before the birth records were digitized, had their birth records destroyed by fire, by tornadoes, by other natural disasters. In particular, the state of Louisiana, which is very largely Republican, by the way, had a lot of birth certificates destroyed by Katrina. So my question for you is, do you care about them? Do you have to be like, what about them? Like, you're trying to make this about some weird thing about how driver's license to vote in the next election. I never said anything about driver's license to vote in the next election. Also, speaking of hurdles, this admin. Hi, Brett. How you doing? This admin has instructed Postal Service to toss out mail-in ballots received after E-Day, even if they were postmarked on time. And Trump has told them not to deliver ballots that don't have, that haven't sent in their voter rolls to this federal registry, which is completely unconstitutional and illegal. So, and he's trying to change the Constitution by executive order. Do you know what powers the President of the United States has over our elections based on the Constitution? None. And it wasn't accidental. They didn't go, oops, how could we forget the president? No, the president was left out deliberately because the founders did not want a king. And they didn't want to give the person who stood to benefit the most from an election the power to determine the outcome. Okay, so you're saying it should be available online for address changes. I am saying that whether you're registering online or making an address change or whatever, you should be able to do that online. I have no problem. I do not see any reason why you should have to go to DMV to register to vote. There's none. It currently is in most places. When I moved out, I went to the post office and filed a mail forwarding card and signed a change of address card for my voter registration card. Got one in the mail 2 weeks later. And that's the way it should be. There's nothing wrong with that. That doesn't hurt anybody. All it does, and especially when you're talking about this close to the election, this is the other issue I have with this. If you wanted to argue in good faith that you're just concerned about the integrity of the election, and even if there aren't people, non-citizens voting in massive numbers, and you wanted to argue that just because it can't be proven doesn't mean it's not happening, and there is enough people that have concerns about the integrity of our elections that we need to change the laws to make it harder for non-citizens to vote. I wouldn't necessarily agree with you, but at least I would say, if your concern is the integrity of the elections, does changing the voter ID laws 4 months, or not the voter registration laws 4 months before, with a lot of stuff that's really indeterminate and a lot of vague stuff in there, and it's just going to cause a lot of chaos, is that increasing voter integrity? Or are you only talking about your concerns about voter integrity? Does the other half's concerns about voter integrity matter to you? Like, if you really want to have a voter law that both protects the rights of voters and makes it harder for non-voters to vote, I can get behind that. If it's a bipartisan, well thought out bill with actual implementation time involved. If they're trying to make it more complicated in ways that wouldn't actually reduce any illegal voting, yes, they are trying to make it more complicated in ways that wouldn't actually reduce any illegal voting. And this is another thing. And this is perhaps the most ironic thing of all. I've looked through the database of the people that voted, the non-citizens that voted. Like, a lot of the illegal voting that happens has nothing to do with registration. And I've looked through the cases of people who were actually prosecuted for, the non-citizens who voted illegally, and they had fake IDs. They had forged IDs. Almost none of the cases of actual voter fraud by non-citizens would have been prevented by the SAVE Act, which is why I say, if these things are your concern, then you shouldn't be for the SAVE Act, because it doesn't address your concern. It just makes things harder for actual American citizens to vote, with no benefit of keeping non-citizens from voting. And like I said, voter fraud is already super low, and they're just making it a hot topic for further divide people. And only out of it's like about 5% of voter fraud itself is very rare. Like I said, only like 1,400 cases. And there's a reason for that. Is one, the benefit is almost imaginary. One more vote in the state of Texas, that's not going to change anything. I mean, I know every vote counts, so your vote, you should go vote. But your vote, when you're a citizen voting, is not a felony. And you're not going to go to jail for 20 years if your guy loses. Well, not 20 years. I think it's 5 years. So that's an issue, right? The risk reward scenario is very, very, very against illegal voting, which is why it happens so rarely. And you never hear Republicans address this. You never hear them talk about that. They're just, they're doing it. We just can't prove it. That just proves they're good at it. Oh, just got in, by the way. Hello. Hi, J. Paul. J. Paul? Oh, do Revival and J. Paul know each other? None. Everyone remember to, yes, if you haven't already done so, please like and subscribe. So we can grow as a channel. This is why we left England to begin with. Yes. Speaking of algorithm, YT is suppressing channels like these. It said, oh wow, it reset my notifications to default instead of all. Yeah, and then there's Brett's 9-month ID. And this is what, so for those who don't know what he is referring to, Brett needed a new Social Security card. I think it started with that adventure. And he had to go through hell and high water to get it, because his birth certificate had a typo on it. And so that's not even counting, like what we've talked about is not counting people that maybe have a birth certificate, but don't have easy access to it. And not because they don't live with it, because somebody else screwed up somewhere. I was thinking about this with a friend of Discord. Neither of us got a notice for another political live. We are both signed up to get notifications on. Wow. That's not cool. Google owns YT and Google is MAGA. This whole thing with filtering the news, and now they own Roku, which is like the biggest streaming platform. Like, it's not a streaming channel, but you've got like Google TV and Apple and, Roku and Amazon, they all have, like, when you turn on your TV and there's like this thing there that tells you what's on all your different channels and what to watch and everything like that. Well, Roku is the largest streaming platform. It's like half the people that do streaming use Roku. And so now what's going to be on there? I see like Fox News recommendations. And I'm like, dude, have you met me? I have never once in my life tuned in to Fox News. Why would I want to watch Sean Hannity? And government owns Google monetarily. It's amazing how they cry over Hunter Biden selling a painting for $50K, but they don't blink when Cheeto dust makes billions stealing. Did you know that Nancy Pelosi, over her entire political career, and her husband combined, by the way, a lot of the stuff about Nancy Pelosi kind of overlooks the fact that her husband's job is a hedge fund manager. So his job is to deal with stocks, right? Like, and they try to make it sound like she's corrupt because he trades stocks. But that's what hedge fund managers do. They trade stocks. There's a reason she's never been prosecuted or even like really investigated. You got Tom Cotton sitting there passing the Pelosi Act. And I agree there should be restrictions on people in Congress and their families from trading stocks. But it is crazy how he is so upset about this made up thing that he passes a law named after Nancy Pelosi when she says is nonpartisan, as though naming it after Nancy Pelosi isn't partisan. And then he runs like it's January 6th away from answers about Donald Trump. When Donald Trump, since he got elected, has made 25,000 stock transactions. Again, Nancy Pelosi, over 27 years, has 200. In a year and a half, Donald Trump has 25,000. And he's made more money. He's made 10 times as much as Paul Pelosi has over the 27 years. Where are the Republicans that investigated, Hunter Biden selling paintings? I remember Foghorn Leghorn getting on TV, Comey, and he was sitting there, yammering on about how they had proof that Joe Biden was corrupt, and they showed this check, and in the check was a canceled check, and on that canceled check it said truck. What happened is Joe Biden, when he was going through his hard time, or Hunter Biden, when he was going through his recovery and everything, his dad was helping him out and made some truck payments for him. Then once Hunter got out of rehab and started working again, he repaid his dad for the truck payments. And so it was like a $600 payment for a truck. He was just paying his dad back for a truck payment. His dad, by the way, was a private citizen when this happened. And Comey wants to pretend like that was proof of the Biden crime family. But Donald Trump sitting there manipulating the stock market like a puppet while he's president and making billions of dollars off of it, including benefiting from the actions of people he pardoned who were convicted of laundering money for drug cartels and human traffickers. That doesn't warrant investigating. But Hunter Biden sold a painting Joe Biden covered his son's truck payment as a private citizen. No, just being friendly. Okay. I don't know, Revival. He said hello and was polite when I came in. Well, now you guys know each other. J. Paul, is this your first time here? I don't think I've seen you before. Anyone who thinks Google is MAGA has no idea what they're talking about. Ha 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 ha. Yes, okay. Joel knows better. Joel is in the in. I love it when MAGAs sit there and they like talk about these sorts of things as though they have insight. They know. They know that Google can't be in bed with MAGA because Google's algorithm says, is voter fraud real? The first thing that comes up is not some sort of histrionic, nonsensical ramblings that Donald Trump repeats. I have a Roku TCL TV. All the news they push is Fox and Newsmax on the menu. I've disconnected. I brought a Chromecast and plugged it into HDMI and see it on the app only mode. And said, yeah. I have a Roku speaker bar thing. The speakers are actually really good. So I have I listen to the sound through the speakers, but I use the Chromecast platform. Okay, I get CNN recommendations. You guys act like CNN is liberal. Pelosi, the hit and run guy. What do you mean? The guy that got clubbed and nearly murdered by a right-wing lunatic? I have no idea what you're talking about. Yep, Pelosi also. They crapped on her desk, tore up the whole place, and harmed many, but everybody went free, though they violated a second term. Olympian touches pool paint 10 years. So I was thinking about this, the Olympian guy, and I feel like he has a history of assaulting water. So you might seem like he just touched the water and that should be fine. But remember, he has a long history of abusing water. You go back and you watch his performances and you can see he's got this big stick with this kind of large battering thing, and he just slaps it in the water over and over and over again. And this kind of man on water violence, you can't just overlook it and just say, oh, that's nothing. So you have to take that abuse into account when you look at the fact that he touched water in the Lincoln Memorial reflection pool. It's not just a coincidence. This man has something against water, and he just likes to violently attack water. That was a joke, by the way. Janine Pereira is charging him with felony of 10 years for touching pool paint. MAGA excuse is he says it openly. It must be okay, durr. LOL, and you know better? I'm not even close to MAGA. Look up was getting canceled. Look up who was getting canceled. What are you? Yes, I do know better, Joel, because I read books. I've watched before and commented a few times. It's interesting conversations. Follow the money, Joel. Doesn't answer anything. Oh, I'll follow the money. See, it can be a good place to start. Let's take a look at this. Google has contributed to Donald Trump primarily through presidential inauguration settlements and legal settlement rather than direct. They gave $1 million to the inaugural committee, $22 million to the White House Ballroom Project. So that's $23 million, $24.5 million to resolve a lawsuit Trump filed against YouTube over his post-January account suspension. Google's parent company, Alphabet, pledged $22 million of that money to the Trust for the National Ball. The Trump administration designed those funds to finance a 90. Okay, so all right, so 22 million for the ballroom and $1 million for the inauguration that Alphabet / Google have given to Trump. So yeah, follow the money instead of just shouting random things on the internet. A settlement that never would have won in court. That's the thing, is these settlements would not have won in court. These were extortions. Google is a primary donor helping finance Donald Trump's $300 million White House volume. 23 million is, what is the relevance as to what percent of his net worth it is? Trump's deal in favors. It's not just that. It's what he's shown he can do. If you don't comply with his extortion, he does things like he's doing to ABC, where he tries to regulate you out of existence. Trump deals in favors. 1 cent is too much and shows who they are, right? And, well, okay, if it were Joe Biden, would you say the same thing, Joel? Will only Trump be able to use that ballroom, or all the presidents that come after him be able to use it too? What does it matter? I mean, first of all, his $1 billion airplane, only he will be able to use. None of the presidents that come after him will be able to use. But secondly, that doesn't really change anything. It doesn't matter. Because one, where is the financing on all this stuff? Like, the US taxpayers are paying billions of dollars for this. And we don't know what money is actually going. There's no laws about how this money gets distributed. We don't know that the $22 million from Google is actually going to the ballroom, that he's actually spending it on that. He has a history of using charity to obfuscate his thievery. And I'll give you an example. He had an artist come in, and his artist was going to paint a portrait for whoever won this contest, right? Won this bidding war. Well, Donald Trump used charity money to pay for the portrait, to win this bidding. So the artist painted the portrait of Trump, and then Trump posed for this picture, and then the picture, he auctioned off the picture, and a different charity that was a Donald Trump charity won the auction for the picture. So he made money first off of, the charity to get the picture. Then he made money off of the auctioning off of it, and then the company, the charity company that won the auction to paint the portrait, donated it to Donald Trump, and the portrait ended up in Mar-a-Lago. So he got a free portrait that his charities paid all of this money for, like $10 million for in total. And none of the money went to any actual charity. It all went to Donald Trump. So yeah, when he gets $22 million for his ballroom from Google, I have very little faith that any of that money actually went to the ballroom. If you censor somebody, you should be punished monetarily. Okay, let's talk about censorship, because it seems like a lot of MAGAs still don't understand what censorship means. And if you're really against censorship, then you should be against what Trump is doing. Okay, because the censorship is something the government does. Private platforms have a right to decide what content can and can't go on their platforms. The same as Fox News isn't getting sued because it doesn't have AOC on there every day. Private platforms do not have to give freedom of speech nonsense. And I don't see people complaining about how when Elon Musk bought out Twitter, that all of a sudden all the algorithms changed so that it amplified his content specifically, conservative accounts generally, and muted the higher volume liberal accounts. I'm not saying I was the most successful person on Twitter, but I went from 20 million views in the month of August to 2 million in the month of September. Like right after he bought it, it's like it just tanked. And I like, am I the only one? So I asked some other people that have larger accounts, and they were all saying the same thing. The claim was Google is MAGA. Yes, Google is MAGA. I think all presidents can use the ballroom since it's part of the White House. Again, not the point. Say the same thing about what exactly? I can't remember. Wouldn't you like to have the next Democratic president have a nice ballroom to entertain foreign diplomats? I don't think that there's really a need for it, honestly. They were doing just fine without it. It's not about whether or not we need the ballroom, or, like whether or not people will be able to use the ballroom going forward. It's whether or not we need the ballroom at all. We only have like a couple of events. I think there's, I looked it up. When you have larger events, they have a very nice setup with a very nice outdoor tent. And I think we've had like 23 events like that since 1990. It's not like we have these kinds of events all the time. And nobody ever said, oh, this is outside, this is terrible. Like, it's never been a thing. Like, why do we need one? Like, why didn't he campaign on it if it's so important? This is another thing. Like, you're talking about fiscal responsibility and all this kind of stuff until it comes to this White House thing. And then in case, he gets all his vanity projects and you're like, oh, well, what's wrong with it? And it's like, well, what's wrong with it is that you cut food for children to pay for it. Preach, Joel, you have TDS. This isn't true. What isn't true? I'm sorry, I don't even know whether you're responding to me or to somebody else or what you're responding to, because I am behind in the comments again. If you are new to the show, I am habitually behind in the comments because I try to give every comment a fair response. And sometimes it takes longer to respond to one than it takes people to type one. So I'm sorry there, Eric. I just don't know what isn't true. He knocked down a historical building without getting approval first. That is another issue with it. Is that he's the president for 4 years, not for eternity, right? If every president approached the whole White House thing the way Donald Trump does, we would reinvent the White House every 4 years. And we can't have that. We need continuity from one president to the next. If he wanted to have the White House, the White House changed, go through Congress, have it debated, have actual people that know what they're doing, the historical society and stuff like that, design the whole thing so that it keeps in the tradition of what the White House has looked like, instead of a monstrosity that dwarfs the original White House and looks like something that Nero would design. You should study up on the 9 ways that money is created out of thin air. I don't think I need to study up on that. I'm not really. The ballroom is privately funded. You dip poop. I'm sorry, it's a monetized channel, so I don't use profanity. It is not privately funded. And Donald Trump himself has said that he has requested $1 billion from Congress to pay for it. So instead of just insisting on things and being very angry about things that you don't know, just look it up first. Like, look it up before you correct me with wrong information. I mean, Chris says, LOL, I heard you had an artist paint a painting of an auto pen. The obsession with auto pens is just weird. The ballroom is going to, I think it was $1 billion. Okay. I'm just going to check this up to make sure my facts are right. Okay. The $600 million. Okay, wait. The Washington Post records reveal $600 million estimate for Trump's ballroom. Here, I'll put the link in. So, yes, this is a significant amount of money going to pay for it by the taxpayer. And the problem, like, I want 100% of the White House paid for by taxpayer dollars. My issue is not if taxpayer dollars pay for it, in all honesty. I would rather have it paid for by taxpayer dollars than private citizens, because he who owns the White House owns the president. And you get all these people that put all this money in there, and they're going to expect, things in return, especially when you got a president as transactional as Donald Trump. So what did they get back for that donation? Is it they just got Donald Trump isn't going after them in a lawsuit anymore? Okay. The kids who's... Okay. The ballroom is now going to cost close to $1 billion because of the need for drones for defense and the bulletproof glass, which will be billed to the taxpayers now because of the expense. And it's funny that, we need this after the one assassination attempt that was like not even really remotely close to anything that... It's not like he nearly got assassinated. The guy tried to run through a thing and got shot. I mean, so it's not like we need the ballroom for the president's safety. And we know we don't need the ballroom from the president's safety because he had the stupid UFC thing and he had his divisive speech on July 4th. Like, if he really needs the ballroom to be so secure, why is he doing all these things in public? MAGA want protesters to STFU, but they can't stand it when they get blooped on a channel in Tubeville. Ducking snowflakes. Have you ever tried to pawn your views at the pawn shop to see how valuable they really are? No. Do you really think making claims and running from proof of that claim is smart? You're talking to Just Jay. I don't know what his claim is. You know what? You are right. My bad, bro. Okay, I guess all people using any platform should be upset about them blocking comments they disagree with. That's a red flag for platforms that started out blocking nothing. Look at it that way. Why? I mean, as a person who streams, all right, I block some people, and I don't block people for disagreeing with me. I block people for a few reasons. I will block people for being racist. Overtly racist. And I'll give them a couple of warnings first and ask them, like, if they're racist or transphobic. And I'm not saying like they think that, you shouldn't have trans people in sports. I'm talking about people that use pejoratives. I will block people. The other thing I'll block people for, if they just come on and just start spamming, regardless of what they're saying. And they just take over the comment section because it ruins it for everybody that's actually trying to watch the channel. And the other thing I'll block is people that are just here to troll. Like, if you want to have a conversation, I'm fine with that. But, and I give people a chance. It's not like I block people out of the box. Oh, you said something I don't disagree with, I block you. But there are some people that want to hijack the channel and they want to hijack the conversation. And they are so belligerent and obtuse and obdurate and obnoxious that eventually everybody else on the channel is not having fun watching the channel. So it affects me to have them doing their comments. So yeah, I think if you're in somebody else's house, you have a responsibility to behave with courtesy. And if you are not behaving with courtesy, they retain the right to kick you out of their house. The kids these days listen to the rap music, which gives them brain damage with the hipping and the hopping and the bipping and the bopping. The kids don't know what the jazz is all about. You see? Pants on the ground, looking like a fool with your pants on the ground. All right. Hi, Biff. YouTube is flagging your comments and being held for review. It's automatic. Hi, Biff. How much of your life's energy is spent on arguing about politics? 15, 20%. It's funny how people that don't agree with me always want to make it like, oh, you're why are you wasting your time on this? You're on the channel. Yeah, I didn't force you to come watch this. If you want to watch something else, go ahead. And no skin off my back. But yeah, I think that what happens in my world that I live in is important. So I try to be aware, and I try to help other people be aware. I'm sorry if you think that I shouldn't be spending on my life on what is important to you, but I will spend my life's energy on what is important to me, and you're just going to have to learn to live with that. In real life, getting rid of trolls keeps the viewers actually engaging in the conversation, happier and more apt to return. Right. And I was more permissive until my actual viewers that were here to engage in conversation, some of them agreeing with me, some of them disagreeing with me. I even had MAGAs telling me to block some people because they were just taking away the conversation. And I had people that agree with me. And I have Republicans that, like anti-Trump Republicans, if I remember, Brett was a Republican before but now he's just like, he's definitely not for Trump. But I think my channel, I have a pretty broad spectrum of regulars. I have libertarians, and I have people to the far left and people to the right. I don't know. Even some MAGAs that come here to troll and then end up, saying, well, hey, you know what? Maybe some of what this guy says makes sense. If you guys could see half the crap that gets held for review by YouTube. But yeah, and so Brett is one of the people that was like begging me to, filter some of the comments. So I made Brett a moderator. And the ballroom would be about twice as big as the White House. What's next? A giant-sized McDonald's on the West Wing? Yes. And I'm like, if you really think a ballroom is important, I'm fine with that. But if you think a ballroom is important enough to build, it's important enough to go through Congress to get it approved. It's important enough to get the plans approved by the legal process that is laid out by law. Don't make it just about the ballroom. Like, yes or no. This is Republican MAGAs love the false dichotomies. Ballroom or no ballroom. How about a ballroom that all of America can get behind by going through the actual legal process of having one built? It's time they let the people vote on things again, like a ballroom. I heard he's going to have the entire White House painted in gold and change the name of the gold on his last month in office. And change the name to the gold. Wouldn't be surprised. One of the weirder stories is like doing like this gold gilding stuff, and he wanted to make sure it was done right, so he grabbed out this tube of super glue and glued like a gold strip somewhere. It's like such everything with him is so narcissistic and weird. And it's just like, why do people feel like this man is the greatest president ever? Like, honestly, I keep thinking about this. I've been thinking about this over and over. What has he actually accomplished as president? And I mean this sincerely. What has he done? In his first term, in terms of major legislation, he got one thing passed: tax cuts for billionaires and his tax reform, which benefited billionaires disproportionately by a lot. Then in his second term, he doubled down on that, made and then cut Medicaid funding, cut SNAP benefits to pay for the tax cuts for billionaires. It is the single largest transfer of wealth from the poor to the rich in American history. Now, if you're for that, if you think that is a good thing, you're welcome to it. But how is that better than stopping the Nazis the way FDR did? Or ending slavery the way Abraham Lincoln did? Or, I don't know, like inventing the literal job of president the way George Washington did? What makes Donald Trump, what achievement of his is better than ending slavery? Go on. I'll wait. Give me an answer. Like, I did this whole notion that he is the greatest president ever is just plain sycophantry. I actually have a word I have invented just for MAGAs. It's tortamentu or something like that. I can't remember. There's a word for when you combine words, and that's what this is. Sycophant and fantasy. It's like they are so sycophantic and they have this kind of fantasy of what Trump is. You know, you see the, like the muscular Trumps, paintings where he's like Rambo with a football helmet scoring the touchdown while he's shooting off the Nazis and, I don't know, doing some other kind of crazy nonsense. These weird, obsessive AI art, bizarre imagination things that he then looks at and says, yes, this is me. And then he posts them on his True Social account. I call that sycophantasy. They've created this fantasy of what Trump is, and they are a sycophant for that artificial fake Trump. And even in his physique, they have lied to themselves that he is this like ripped athlete when he's just kind of a dopey, fat-looking orange dude that's, an octogenarian that poops his pants. When you heard the story of him getting caught with the super glue, putting those cheap plastic gold plates on the White House fireplace mantle, he is such a trailer trash billionaire with billions. This is like, and this is another thing, is people confuse gaudy with classy. The White House was classy. Now it's gaudy. Make America gaudy again. That should be that should be what the G stands for. I think 1 billion is the amount they are going to fund. Ballroom plus White House security, etc. Okay, so that makes sense. I've heard the number $1 billion floated around. The golden rule is is those who have the gold make the rules. No, that's actually not in the Constitution. Brett says, yawn. You mean the bail room? Oh, that's pretty good. I mean, I don't know why a man with hands that small needs so much ballroom. His ear was uneven remotely close to his head. You're talking about the assassination attempt. Um, I think that was real. I think there are dead people. So I don't abide the like that first one. I don't think that was. But he's never actually come close to death. And if it were, well, I'm not going to say that because that'll get me banned. The world's first magically really cartilage. Now, here's the thing about the blooding. Like, this is going to maybe not be something my friendly audience wants to hear. You have a lot of capillaries in your earlobe. I studied this to see if it was valid. And you have a lot of capillaries in your earlobe. And so that's why your ear tends to bleed a lot. You know, like you just nick your ear. If you've ever just nicked your ear, since I turned, since as I've been getting older, I'll wake up and I'll get these extremely long, crazy hairs popping out of my ears. It's like I went to bed and there wasn't an ear hair there, and I wake up and there's like a 17-foot ear hair there. And so I'll cut it, and sometimes, like every once in a while, I accidentally cut my ear, and it's just like, how did that much blood come out of this little tiny cut? It's because you have all these capillaries in your ear that hold a lot of blood, and then because those capillaries hold that much blood, your ear heals really fast. Which is why, if you ever got your ear pierced, you have to walk around with a post in your ear for like 3 weeks until it like you get a skin closure around there, and the hole stays. Because all of that blood means that you've got that much healing power going into the earlobe. So, like with all the blood coming out of it and the healing power that's in the blood, healing the earlobe, I think that there is a reasonable explanation to why he, and then you add his theatrics on top of it, like with the big tampon on his face and everything. Like, I think that was probably oversized. I think he amplified what happened to make himself look like a hero. But I think that there was probably like some kind of fragment, either from the bullet or from, more likely, I think, from the teleprompter that just hit his ear. I don't think he was ever really in any danger. AC/DC should play at the ribbon cutting of the new ballroom. Why? Why do you say that? AC/DC was my first concert. The world's first magically healing ear cartilage. Yeah, this is actually like medically. I mean, I was reading an ENT wrote an article about this, and I was like, okay, well, that makes sense. Interacting with trolls helps the algorithm and also build your debating skills. Yeah, I think it depends on the troll. Like, sometimes it does. I think that some people like watching an honest back and forth, a good faith back and forth. And I try to have that. But just letting somebody hijack the channel. Like, one example is we had one guy on here that he just said the same thing like 30 or 40 different times. And, I would respond to his question, and he just kept saying the whole thing. And, or you'll have some people that will just like Control C and then Control V and then like enter the same comment like 50 times. So, to a point, I agree, Golf, and I'm happy to interact with, and I wouldn't even say trolls. I would say I'm happy to interact with people who disagree with me, unless they're not respecting everybody else that's on the channel also. There's no debating when somebody just comes out swinging with the word yes. And there's something else that I call MAGA Tourette's, and apologies to people who actually have Tourette's, because I don't mean this as a pejorative against you. It's just the articulation that works best, that you have some people on the MAGA side that just spew like random words, no matter what you say. Oh, TDS, as though like, yeah, whatever. You point out that Donald Trump has made $2 billion off his first year in the White House, and they're just like, oh, you've got TDS. but Biden. So, you know, the thing, you can't have a debate in good faith with people that are acting in bad faith. And so if people are acting in bad faith at a certain point, there's no value to conversing with them. And there's no value in devoting real estate on the show to them. If you come into somebody else's country, you have a responsibility to follow the rules. Not sure what that has to do with anything at all. Non sequitur much? And the old standby, Trump 2028. Yes. That blocking comment wasn't for personal streamers. I'm talking the big service, YouTube, Instagram. So do you think that they should be required to show child porn? The thing is those streaming channels, they're companies, and those companies need revenue. And that revenue comes largely from advertising. And if they're sitting there promoting Nazi stuff, I'm not saying you're a Nazi or anybody is a Nazi. I am saying if they promote self-identified Nazi propaganda, as Twitter was doing under Elon Musk, then what happens is sometimes that Nazi propaganda gets placed right above or below a Coca-Cola ad. And so Coca-Cola is like, we don't want our product being adjacent to Nazi propaganda. So we're not going to pay for ads anymore. And so they pull their ads. And so then that costs the private company money. So are you saying that private companies should be forced to post to allow Nazi propaganda even if it hurts their business? Because, I think that's a very fair and valid point, right? And it's definitely not censorship. Censorship is through the government. I thank you. As I was reading it, I got into it. I got into the personality of that. That was actually, I really thought that was a clever tweet, or a clever post. I think it's funny when people add ownership to a country that they don't own. It's like people claiming America is Christian. Where did they get that idea? They got that idea. There's a book, it's called From Sea to Shining Sea or something, about written in like the 80s. This guy that gave this pseudo-Christian history of the United States, proving, how the America has always been a Christian country. And there have always been Christians that have influenced the country. But plenty of people that aren't Christians had a major impact on the country. Benjamin Franklin was not a Christian. Thomas Jefferson was not a Christian. Paine was not a Christian. Like, many of the founding fathers weren't Christians. And that's why we have in the First Amendment the separation of church and state. A lot of, and also, it wasn't just to protect the government from religion. It was to protect the religion from the government. A lot of people came over here because they were persecuted by their governments. And that's why you have the two clauses. I go to channels where people react to my comment. It makes me feel like I have influence over others. Does this count as a reaction? Kitty, the smartest person I know, is like me. We do not vote for a party. We vote for people. And this is a great segue into the next subject I wanted to talk about, because I think this is interesting. I started, like after Donald Trump called DSA communists, I made a meme to show the differences between DSA and communism. And boy, did that open up a storm of poop on Blue Sky. And it seems like there's a lot of things that end up getting conflated. So there's the DSA, there is democratic socialism, there is social democracy, and there is communism, which these are all. And then also, in addition to that, there are the candidates who are Democrats who belong to the DSA coalition. All right. So let's go through what each of these things means. Okay. The democratic socialism, strictly speaking, is an attempt to achieve socialism through democratic means. It's to win elections and become socialist through that, rather than like Mao and just overthrow everything. So even if you were to go to the strictest definition of DSA, there's already a clear delineation between that and communism, as Donald Trump was suggesting. But there's more to that. There is in addition to democratic socialism, there's also something called a social democracy. And people conflate democratic socialism and social democracy a lot. Social democracy is more what we call mixed capitalism. And mixed capitalism means that you have some aspects of the society are socialist and some aspects of the society are capitalist. And then you also have regulated capitalism. To a large degree, I think almost every American believes that at least some degree of mixed socialism is good, or mixed capitalism is good. Like most of us wouldn't want to privatize the entire U.S. military, for instance, or privatize all the police departments, because some things should be owned by the public, because if they are owned by one person, power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. And so it's like if you have one person owns the military, that one person owns the country. So that's bad. There are some things like, how about utilities? How about healthcare? That these things are more, some people are okay with them being privatized, and some people think they should be socialized. And then even with healthcare, are you talking about the actual hospital? Are you talking about paying for the healthcare? Different things, right? So there's a spectrum when you're talking about a social democracy. The Nordic countries are more on the socialist side than we are. In a lot of the socialist countries, you have or a lot of the Nordic countries, and even most of Europe, right? Like with healthcare, they spend more money on healthcare, and they guarantee everybody has access to it, as opposed to the United States, where we ration healthcare based on what your job is and how much money you make. Most people everywhere else in the world looks at that and says, that's extreme. So that's social democracy. Then you have the DSA. And the DSA has this like website and everything. And they say on their website that their goal is to achieve, socialism of some things through democracy. And I think it's like things like utilities and like the government should run your electric company, for instance, so that everybody can have electricity, which I think it's not mainstream, but I see the logic there. I see the humanity in that. I don't think that families should lose heat in the middle of the winter because the breadwinner lost their job. There needs to be more socialization in some areas, but they're not for absolute socialism. And then you have members of the DSA who agree with some, like there are DSA candidates like Memdani, like AOC, who agree with parts of what the DSA says, but not everything. but they agree with the DSA more than they agree with the Democratic Party. And there is a coalition. The DSA doesn't have like a blood pact that you have to agree with every single thing that's on their website before you agree with it. So you've got communism, which is what Russia, USSR and Mao and all of that. Nobody is talking about that. Absolutely nobody except for Donald Trump. The second thing is democratic socialism, which is socialism achieved through democracy. Then there is social democracy, which is mixed capitalism. And then there are the DSA candidates who more or less, are in that mixed capitalism side. So they are more, if you look at their policies, they are more like social democrats than democratic socialists. So I had people on Blue Sky sitting there accusing them of being democratic socialists because they're members of the DSA. And they're not, if you look at their policy. Anyway, I just think one thing I like about the whole argument and the whole discussion is it gets us beyond the binary politics of everything. And as I've said so many times on this show, I wish we could talk about issues instead of identities and stuff like that. So Kitty says, it's like me, Brett is like me, we do not vote for a party, we vote for people. And I really wish more people would identify with that. I think one thing about the people that you're voting for is you also have to consider who they're voting with, though. Because those votes matter too. When a Senate, if you're voting for a senator, for instance, that senator is going to vote for or against a Supreme Court justice. And you have to factor that into your voting. I think that a lot of people don't factor that into their voting, and then they complain when you've got the fascist Supreme Court. If voters had taken that into account, then John Roberts wouldn't be on that court. None of the 3 Trump voters would be on that court. Neither one of the what's his name? The other Bush. Anyway, 5 of the 6 Supreme Court justices that are Republican were voted for by people who lost the popular vote in their first term. That means if people had played chess instead of reactionary, I'm not voting for the lesser of 2 evils, we would not be having a lot of the problems we have right now. We need to think things through. So if you live in a state where your Senate candidate that's won the primary and is on the ticket, it's too late to debate whether or not they should be on the ticket. They are on the ticket. And your vote is not just for that senator. Your vote is for who Donald Trump replaces Alito and Thomas with. Think. Thank you, Brett. Brett says thumbs up. That makes me so much more sense than just blindly following one party. It's where he plans to hide out when the poop hits the fan. And of course, that would be the fecal matter he has dumped on the United States and a bigger, yeah. I wonder about that. There's this kind of theory that goes on that he's building this bunker so that when he doesn't hand over the power, he can like continue being president or something. And it's just like, okay, you go ahead. You go ahead, you just lock yourself down there. And he's basically in prison. Like, just come up and we'll arrest you. He doesn't have any power beyond that. Saves the trouble of having to figure out what to do with the Secret Service. Secret Service is going to be like, I'm not staying down here with you for the rest of my life. Brett says, Kitty, we were about to put you on a milk carton. Kitty popped in last week, but you weren't here that day. So how about a ballroom that's not a crass, gigantic gymnasium the size of a football stadium with a gilded toilet in his usual trashy style? Right. Make America gaudy again. That seems to be his goal. Are democratic policies going to interfere with the wealth of some boomers being transferred down to their children and grandchildren? One would hope. There's a thing, it's called buy, borrow, die. You get a bunch of stocks, then because it's not realized wealth, it's never taxed. Then you die, you transfer it to your children. Because there's no inheritance tax, your children don't have to pay taxes. And then your children just live off of that wealth. And when they say borrow, they mean like you borrow against the stocks you own. And you just keep borrowing against it. Never sell it, so you never make any money, but you can just borrow more money as it goes up. And, to pay off your other loans and stuff like that. So effectively, you live the life of a billionaire and never have to pay taxes on it either. This whole notion that you can't pay taxes on unrealized wealth, to me, is just, they act like that in itself is a moral certainty. I don't agree. Oh, but they shouldn't have to sell stocks to pay taxes. We make people sell their houses to pay taxes. Why can't we make people sell stocks to pay their taxes? Only for the ultimate, yeah. And actually, right now, I think there is a cap on inheritance tax that's like $10 million or something. It's not like mom leaves her, $100,000 house to her kids, and the kids have to pay 40% of that in taxes. No. But if Elon Musk leaves $1 trillion in stocks to his kids, yeah, there's no reason that some of that can't be taxed. If you throw away $2 million without a blink, you don't really need it. Exactly. Restoring the right to freely express racism, and for the billionaires, okay, you can go be racist all you want. Nobody went to jail for something they did on Twitter. Oh, I see. I'm sorry. I think I misunderstood. Restoring the right to freely express racism. So you're saying that facetiously. And for the billionaires, the fact that he redirected all the wealth and power to them and plans to do even more of that. Yes. And then he has so much money that he just told the advertisers to fornicate off. Because the money doesn't matter to him. Elon Musk has so much money that it will never, ever, ever be an issue in his life. Masculinity is humanity. Superpower ad Trump taps into that with his artwork. Nah, I don't even know what that's just gibberish, golf. But that tends to be the MAGA thought process. But those same people will lose their minds over $100 going to a hungry person on the street. Oh, God forbid that they use it to buy a soda pot. Oh, that homoerotic art of Trump all ripped. It's hilarious. Grinder poop. It's like, did they fap to that? A large part of the United States that lives in trailers and he connects with them. All right, so here's something. There's I forget his name. Johnson. He's actually a really good comedian. He's this black guy, and he's really smart. Wish I could think of his name, but he gets a lot of clips on YouTube and stuff. And he was talking about understanding like the MAGA voters. And he said, Trump is the black Obama. And then I'm like, what? And then he started explaining it. So there's this kind of stereotype that is perpetuated, even if successful black people in TV shows and movies, it's always like this blind side kind of stuff where the black person is raised without a dad and in a broken home, and his mom does drugs, and there's all this pressure to do drugs, and he overcomes all that adversity and makes something of himself. And, it's a feel-good story. And it's not that those things don't happen. But that becomes the Black identity, to where if you see a successful Black man, there's this assumption they overcame adversity and didn't just like grow up in a middle-class neighborhood, went to college and earned, got there the same way the average white person does. So that's part of that assumption. Then the other part of that assumption is it's only Black people that do that. There are white people that grow up, have to struggle to make a living, have to like work their way through, pull their stills up by the bootstraps and all of that. There really are. And a lot of those people feel like, oh, what are you doing telling me about white privilege and how I have it easier? I didn't have it easy. My dad abused me. Not me. I'm saying that's what they said. My dad is actually an incredible dad. But you know what I'm saying? Like, there are white people that grew up poor, that struggled, that had to overcome things and now are successful. And they feel like they are being told that they need to feel guilt about their success because it just came because they're white. And that feeling, I'm not talking about the validity or invalidity of that sentiment. I'm talking about just the existence of it. Trump taps into that feeling. Trump hears that tone, and that is why they support him. And that's what, the guy meant by he's the Black Trump, or the white Obama. And I think that there's a lot to that. And I think, like, when you talk about white privilege, for instance, there's this misunderstanding of white privilege. When they think of white privilege, they think, oh, everything in life was given to you on a platter. And that's not what people mean when they say white privilege. When people say white privilege, they mean I can walk into a grocery store and not have everybody assume that I'm there to rob the place. I can get pulled over by a cop and not worry about getting shot. Like that's what white privilege means. It's not about what you achieved. It's about how other people see you. And, I have a friend named Edgar who, we talked about race a lot. And one time I said, Edgar, here's the problem. Do you see yourself as a Black man or as a man? And he said, as a Black man. And I said, see, that's your problem. I just see myself as a man. And he said, you can. And that's the problem. And I thought about that. I don't have to consider my race on a daily basis. But let's say only 5% of white people in the country are authentically racist, right? That means if a Black person runs into 20 white people in a day, he runs into racism every single day, statistically, right? I mean, not being literal or anything, but on average, basically every single day they engage with a racist. And that doesn't have to be an overt racist, as somebody calling him the N-word or something. That can just be you walk into a gas station and you're looking for something to eat, as I watched happen with Edgar one time, and the cashier is sitting there eyeballing you to make sure you're not there to shoplift. You get that kind of thing. And I mean, one time I went into a store with Edgar, and I was like kind of bummed out. He was actually coming back from work. He had a master's degree. His parents were both PhDs. He came from a very good home. He was like a very elegant man, and he was well dressed. And he's going and he's getting his food. I was looking like a bum. And I had a t-shirt and cutoff shorts and tennis shoes on. And the cashier was sitting there eyeballing Edgar, as though Edgar was there to rob him blind. This is what I mean. That is encountering racism. He has to worry about things I don't have to worry about. And that's what white privilege is. It shouldn't actually be called white privilege. It should be called black punitive or something like that. White privilege is just not having to deal with stuff that black people shouldn't have to deal with. But anyway, people get confused by that. They think that somehow they're supposed to feel guilty for being white. And you don't have to be feeling guilty for being white. But what you should do is consider if black people should have to feel guilty for being black. And if black people should be judged for being black. And whether or not you not having to deal with that kind of judgment is actually good for you, right? If black people are less inclined to get jobs than white people, then that means white people are more inclined to get jobs than black people. They did these studies where they'd send out the exact same resume, everything exactly the same, with the exception of the name. And the name would be like Chad Barnhauser or Lamar Jackson, right? And that's all that changed in the whole thing, in their race blind applications. But the names weren't race blind. And the people with the black sounding names got a lot less callbacks than the people with the white sounding names. Can't say it has anything to do with merit because they were the exact same applications. Why do you think that is? White privilege. Does that mean that the white guy that did all this stuff to apply for the job didn't work hard? No, it doesn't. But it doesn't mean the black guy didn't work hard either. I think it was ridiculous for an entire crowd to put maxi pads on their ears. It was such a MAGA thing. Like when they wore garbage bags. He resembles a lizard to a startling degree, and I wonder why more comedians haven't been cruel about that. Normally, no matter what someone has done, I don't think making fun of that, but he is an exception. Okay, I'm just going to have to disagree with you a little bit here. Ron DeSantis is the actual lizard man in the MAGA movement. Watching Ron DeSantis trying to be a real boy is almost as funny as watching Vance try to pretend like a real boy. The MAGA maxi pad craze was a bit much, Brett. That was a great way. That was a great way to minimize somebody getting pew pew in the head. He didn't get pew pew in the head. I mean, that's a great way to overstate somebody getting a fragment in an ear. And I don't minimize it. I just don't dramatize it. Grown-ass adult marrying. If anybody minimized it, it was actually Donald Trump. When he puts on the tampon on his head and walks around like he just survived being tortured or something. And you know who got minimized? The guy who got killed. I actually donated money to the family of the man who was killed, the fire department guy. How come Donald Trump didn't go to his funeral? He's the one that minimized it by turning it into a circus. Anywhere on the head bleeds profusely when it's specifically the scalp, ears, face. Did he get that thing on his ear from Tim when he visited? Okay, do you understand, Golf? Do you understand what happened with the whole tampon Tim thing? In the state of Minnesota, which, by the way, I went there. I lived there for several years. I went to high school there for 2 years. I went to college there, both Bible college and regular college. So I'm pretty familiar with the state. And you have a lot of really small towns in that state. And in those states, I went to Sacred Heart High School in East Grand Forks, North Dakota. And if you ever want to know what that area is like, watch the movie Fargo, because most of that, actually, that movie was filmed in Grand Forks. I lived in Grand Forks, went to school in East Grand Forks. When I had to walk across the bridge. But anyway, that whole area is just like farm towns 20, 30 miles apart that are like very small schools. This is like Hoosiers or whatever. We actually only had 9 players on our basketball team. We played schools that had fewer players than us. We played one school that only had 5 people on the basketball team. They could barely form a basketball team. One time, their best player fouled out, but because they didn't even have anybody on the bench to replace the guy that fouled out, we just got like extra free throws every time he fouled. All right, so you get these really, really tiny schools. And you have boys sports and you have girls sports. So a lot of these schools, you go there and they don't have like a guest and a home locker room. They have a boys and a girls locker room. And if you go to a really small school with a girls with only the 2 locker rooms, the visitors use the opposite gender locker room. So we would go to some of these schools and we would change in the girls' locker room. Vice versa, the girls' teams, when they traveled, would go and be in the boys' locker rooms. So there was a law passed that said that tampons had to be made available for all females. Some schools put tampons in the boys' locker room so that girls from visiting schools would have access to tampons. Why would anybody have an issue with that? The whole politicization of that was just a transphobic, nonsensical scare tactic. So now that I have corrected you on that, I expect that as a person acting in good faith, you will either look it up and confirm that what I said is true, which it is, and you will no longer use that as a talking point. Because I think you have integrity, and I hope you prove my faith in you does not get set aside. Yes, I've said it before, and I'll say it again. I need to develop a humiliation kink because this is all so embarrassing. He wore that 2x2 square of gauze like an earmuff for weeks. Only someone with bone stirrers would consider that a wound. Kitty was here for a hot second, then poof. She's got a podcast of her own now that's related to the Epstein thing. It's actually, I'm really happy for her. The nick it would have taken to cause that amount of blood was like 1/8 of an inch at most, a shallow 1/4 inch. I've bled for hours from a paper cut. Oh, paper cuts suck. Try going next time you see Kitty. Maybe get some kitty treats. Kelly said she's busy a lot. She is. She's actually got stuff going on. The march she's got her actual job to do too. The march on DC with shades of Charlottesville. It's amazing how much Kitty gets done. The march on DC with the shades of Charlottesville all over again. Yeah, this was another thing. So the white supremacists, the Proud Boys or whatever, I forget which one it is. So, marched on DC. And, so then, of course, you got the North Dakota, Doug Bergstrom or whatever his name is, sitting there saying, well, I don't agree with what they say, but they have a right to do it. Then you've got people all over conservative, like basically saying that it should be against the law to say mean things about Trump. It's like when Republicans say that they don't agree with what the white supremacists say, but they have a right to say it. What they really mean is that they agree with what the white supremacists say, but they don't have the courage to say it. White House is ugly and copy of Kremlin. All those golden things everywhere. He ruined a historic building. Unfortunately, he should be made to pay for the destruction of the place and renovation of it. If I were a president, if I were running for president right now, I would actually make a campaign promise to restore the White House to what it used to look like. If you bleed like that, try some lavender essential oil on it. It will make the blood clot, even if someone is on blood thinners or has a bleeding disorder. It also has some antimicrobial effects. One thing, like since I've been getting into gut health and stuff, I don't know if you can answer this, but just a question that pops to mind is how does that affect your immune system? Because I've been reading there's a lot of the stuff where you use the antiseptics and stuff, it like kills so much bacteria that your immune system starts attacking your good microbes that actually help. So, and like you need, and so that's why some people have so many gut problems, is they don't have the probiotics hanging out in their gut doing the hard work it's supposed to do. The White House reminds me the village of Valkenvania from the movie with Chevy Chase and Demi Moore and Dan Aykroyd. Oh my goodness, I need to watch that movie again. Demi Moore, like she had like back at the beginning of her career, she had some like really good roles in comedies. One Crazy Summer with John Cusack was another one. The 250 speech will not stand up to time. It was 98% rally slop, 2% unhinged. Should be something that can be related 150 years from now. How embarrassing. And the way Fox News made it sound was just like, this is going down in history as one of the greatest speeches any president has ever given. It was just nutty babble. Like they can't quote something from the speech that was actually inspiring. Why does the NASA administrator feel he is above the FAA? Why does he feel the need to showboat his airplane over to DC after the FAA denied him? I hadn't heard about that one. Because Trump. You're not getting my point. Services are blocking more things now than they ever used to. Wouldn't that be a red flag for the loss of free speech? That's all I'm pointing out. How far will it go? I don't know. I can't address what you're saying without specifics. I think that private companies should be able to run their companies. Even if, like, I've never complained about the way that before when people complained about how Twitter banned Trump, I said, he agreed to the terms of service. It's a private company. They can run it how they want. And then they were like, oh, Trump's going to buy Twitter. And I'm like, if Trump buys, if Musk is going to buy Twitter, as though like somehow he owns me now. And I just say, well, if he owns Twitter, he owns Twitter. And he can do it. And he, like I said, he promoted all the right-wing stuff and the Nazi stuff, and he muted all the liberal stuff. Well, that's his right. I never called for him to be prosecuted for it, but I do wonder where all the voices went, all the free speech voices, including his own. In light of what's going on with data, and the other thing is, like, to me, the real censorship is when things like are happening with, Jimmy Kimmel and Stephen Colbert and a lot of the, the lawsuits that's, the government has a lot of money to sue people. Whether the lawsuits are frivolous or not, the money is not frivolous. And it ends up being cheaper for CBS to settle this suit than to fight it out in court, especially when they've got mergers that the government can ixnay. And so agreeing to settle lawsuits that have no chance and censoring themselves to get things approved. You've got this Barry Weiss. Is that her name? I mean, just a unqualified person running CBS News now. And I mean that she is unqualified. There's a last week tonight with John Oliver did a thing on her. Watch that. Like, I'm not saying that hyperbolically. She has no business in that role. But that's who the MAGAs wanted, and so that, well, I shouldn't say the MAGAs wanted. That's who Trump wanted, so that's who's running it. All right. This is the government actually interfering with actual news. That to me is a much bigger censorship concern than somebody getting blocked on Twitter. In light of what's been going on with data centers, I think the government being more involved with making sure citizens have appropriate access to basic utilities and clean drinking water. Might be needed, because right now these data centers are doing damage. I'm not sure that it should be done through socializing utilities or just more regulation of data centers. I think we need to, like, it's certainly something that needs to be looked at. One thing, and I hate to give him credit, but I don't know if it was his idea or not, but it's where I heard it from. The idea of building the data centers in space. Because then if you build them in space and then just transmit the information off of satellites, then it solves two problems, right? One, you don't need any water, and two, you don't need any electricity. You don't need any water because you don't have to worry about it cooling. It's in space. Of course, you don't need cooling. You don't need electricity because you've got all that solar energy out there. All you need is solar panels. And so it's like no energy and just all kinds of information. There's still other issues with AI that need to be regulated, but it solves those two problems. Of course, building AI data centers in space, that's not an overnight project. So skipped over Walter so I can read the rest of that comment. Ivanka Trump has been quiet for a while. Yeah, she kind of has disappeared, hasn't she? It's funny that Donald Trump talked about a threesome and she wasn't part of it. Trump has, with his children, by the way. Trump has been quiet for a while. Now she and her husband are annoying Albania. Oh, I hadn't heard about that. It's hard to keep track of all the insanity. What do they need? Oh, that one, the one where Kushner is, yeah. They just feel like they own the world. Whether it's the World Cup or an island in Albania, or telling Europe how much money they have to spend on defense spending. He wants to have his board of peace because he's bored of peace, I guess. BORED of PEACE. Might be needed because right now these data centers. Okay, no. All right. She says, I wish I less. Yeah. The lesser of two evils is still less evil. I will always. Yeah, it's like if it's Hitler and somebody less evil than Hitler, you go with the person less evil than Hitler. President Snow from Hunger Games. Who is your favorite movie villain? For some reason, mine is the Sheriff of Nottingham in the Robin Hood, the Kevin Costner Robin Hood movie. I think it was, what's his name? The guy from Slow Horses, I think, that played the guy. About the bunker being the hideout, AK, ask AI to compare what happened in Hungary. Yeah, this is, you've got some billionaires that are trying to, like, basically build these private islands that become like these nation states where they don't have to pay taxes and they can have their own private militaries and stuff. This is like some futuristic nonsense. I have been so busy with my new podcast and the wiki. And you got to get on that. You got to follow her. Psst, psst. I didn't know you had a podcast. Yep, see? Trump is really. I want to have Kitty talk about her podcast. Oh, I'm going to have a guest on this week. I'm not quite sure when, but a guy named Eddie that is a historian that covers a lot of the history of what's gone on with Black people throughout history and other people of color too. And he just has so much perspective. He's always posting all of these stories that are just like, whoa, how did I not know about this? So anyway, if you like to learn new things, then check out the show this week, because he's just got to get back to me on which day he can make it. That isn't what white privilege is, though. Right. I know that's not what white privilege is, but this is what they hear when they hear white privilege. Kelly gets it. Thank you for taking some time on this topic, because it is so easy to get it twisted when coming from a poor white perspective. And it's like, when you think of it that way, you can see where they're getting that, right? Like they feel like their own experience is getting diminished when you say white privilege, because they misunderstand white privilege. And then when that gets perpetuated by Fox News and conservative politicians, then it's just that age-old thing of rich white people telling poor white people that Black people are the problem. We would like to welcome you to our community and thank you for your contribution to the. I have no idea who you are or what you're talking about. I'm going to go off the assumption that APAC tells me something. I don't really agree with APAC. I'm not an anti-Semitic, but I don't think that Israel should be, committing genocide. So that's the whole backstory to the tampon thing. Okay, makes sense now. Patriot Front. Yeah, that's the white supremacist group. With the lavender essential oil, I mean to apply it topically to wherever is bleeding, not take it internally. No, I know that, but even like topical stuff, like even just hand sanitizer can affect, because like you use hand sanitizer and then you eat chips or whatever, and so some of the surface level things, even just a dog. Did you know that if you have a dog, you probably have more probiotics living in your stomach? Like the beneficial kind, because they're bringing in all the little whatchamacallits, the microbes from outside. They roll around in the dirt and all of that kind of stuff, and then you pet your dog and then you eat a bag of potato chips. It's actually an interesting topic to get into. Negative effect from the tea in gut health, but that's really outside of my realm of experience. I have a small bottle of lavender essential oil somebody left here, but when I smell it, it doesn't even smell like lavender. I think that, if I remember right, lavender essential oil also is good for allergies. Is that right? If you're familiar, I have some. I bought some for my allergies. If you're familiar with the smell of lavender, Miss Lavender scented stuff doesn't smell like lavender, and it doesn't smell like lavender. It might have something mixed, or it might have gone rancid. Suspect there is an issue with space-based data centers is the latency issues. I don't know how many more latency issues there. I think that, I don't know how much more latency issues there would be than, say, transmitting it through wires across the world. When will Trump stick to his day job? When will he's sticking to his day job? His day job is watching Fox News all day and taking naps during meetings, and I don't know. By the way, in reference to last week on a $200 motor from mainland China shipped by sea, and oh yeah, so this was something to do with tariffs, right? So you're the actual thing costs $200. The actual motor costs $200. Shipping costs $93, unless you wanted the express one, which was $228, and then another $228.90 And then another $200 for tariffs. So you ended up having to spend over $600 for a thing that costs $200. That sucks. And if I remember right, that motor was only available in China. It's not like you could buy it locally. So we got some eyeballs here, and then doggies with eyeballs. That must be a response to my comment about microbes in dogs and stuff. Yeah, there's all kinds of. Did you know? Okay, like gut health, is my new obsession. By the way, I'm down to 148 now. I was 225. I've lost almost 80 pounds just by changing how I eat. And I just I eat some stuff that should not be considered diet food. But I eat actual food. Like I cook my own food, I mill my own flour and all that kind of stuff. And I ferment, stuff. So like this week's project, I'm going to make a sourdough blueberry cream cheese loaf of bread, where the berries, I'm actually using blueberries and strawberries. It's a strawberry blueberry cream cheese type thing. I'm going to ferment the berries and then make the sauce and then mix it in with the dough. And then the dough is going to be like probably going to go with like hard white and einkorn or something. Get a nice mix of flour flavors in there. Which that's another thing, when you're like milling your own flour, you start thinking of the flour as a flavor because you're actually tasting the wheat. And so you learn how different kinds of wheat taste. So it's like the most robust part of a lot of things like bread or pasta. So it's really, really like my food tastes better this way, which is one of the reasons that I think this is different than most diets. Because like most diets, you miss the foods that you used to eat. I don't miss the foods I used to eat because I eat the same dishes. Like I figure out how to make my favorite foods for better gut health. And like milled wheat is really just an extremely good source for prebiotics. And then probiotics, fermenting is a great way to get probiotics. And using, like I make kefir yogurt. I ferment different kinds of pops like gingerbug and kombucha. And then I also ferment fruits, vegetables. I do anaerobic foods. So I get a whole variety of probiotics in my system. And I feel better. I've lost a lot of weight. I'm off my blood pressure medication. Like I've just gotten a lot healthier just by changing how I eat. And it's not like I think that it cures things. I think it's more like not eating poison allows my body to function the way it's supposed to function. Hang on one second. Hang on one second. Are you saying I need to end the podcast? Okay, I guess I have something important to talk to my wife about, so I have to end. She has never done this before, but she just came in and said she needs to talk about something and said she needs to end it. So I will see you guys tomorrow, I think, depending on how things go. And sorry to end so abruptly, but apparently it's some sort of emergency. I'll talk to you later. Bye.